welcome everybody, and thank you for being such lovely, caring pet parents to spend a bit of time finding out how we can help our new puppies have a happy, healthy lifetime. So I'm going to just go through some basics. Sometimes we don't need to use all of the chemicals on offer for puppies, and sometimes we need to choose a diet that suits our own puppy. And also I'd like to thank Colleen O'Day from Companion Dog Training. It was her idea to do this. It was such a good idea. I have spoken at her premises before, so we just decided to do a Zoom
and collaborate and get the information out there, because I'm asked this stuff like literally almost every day of the week by people. So it's great to have this available to, let them have that information, and you're a wealth of knowledge and we'll have it at our fingertips.
Yeah, I guess what really struck me too was that Colleen, who's run, puppy preschools and dog training for many, many, many years now, she mentioned to me that in the last few years she's had to have the puppy preschool puppies on leads because of fights. I guess that's just a representation of how much the chemical accumulation is affecting our puppies, which is really sad. But I mean, the good news is we can do something about it. Yeah, so that was my incentive, I must admit. So some of you may know, but if you don't, I'll just explain who I am. So I'm a vet. I've been a vet for 40 years. I was in the first year to graduate from Murdoch University in Western Australia in 1979. A year later, I learnt acupuncture. And since then, I've become qualified in homeopathy and Western herbs and Chinese herbs. So nowadays, I really just use natural therapies to treat difficult cases that haven't responded to the normal vet therapies. I did have my own vet clinic at East Fremantle for many years, but I now just practice from a veterinary clinic. This is what my consulting room looks like. This is my old one in Bibra Lake. So as you can see, I use Chinese herbs along the top shelf. I use flower essences. I'm a qualified homeopathic practitioner. We've got Western herbs down at the bottom. So I actually don't work in Perth now. I've moved to Baling Up a year ago. And so I have, again, the same setup inside. I just have a freestanding registered vet clinic.
Fantastic.
So that's me. So what we're up to today is how to optimise our new pup's diet and reduce toxic chemicals. So for ourselves, I mean, I guess we really know now that fresh food is healthier than processed food. Fresh food has natural antioxidants. Nature knows how to combine different nutrients in different foods for the best outcome and for the best absorbability, and it can't always be replicated in processed food. And I'll go into that more a little bit later. A lot of people say, oh, natural diet, it's a lot of bother, it takes time, I don't know how to balance it. So hopefully I'll answer those questions for you, because there are lots of different options, and it doesn't have to be hard. And it's generally much healthier for your pup. And I've got research I'll go over later about that. So just simply reducing chemical. I mean, we know that toxic chemicals are causative for a lot of cancers, a lot of autoimmune conditions, even mental conditions, anxiety, autism, etc. We now know that chemicals are a major contributor to those conditions. Probably the most simple thing even non-pet owners can do is reduce their toxic cleaners in the house, even cosmetics. There's some really nasty chemicals. I mean, just read the label, folks. It's really important. In the garden, we don't have to use harmful chemicals. I've got a large property down here, and for the last few years since we've owned it, I just haven't used any nasty chemicals. So it can be done. When you first get a new puppy, we are suggested to vaccinate the puppy, which is a good idea because we don't want puppies getting parvo. And the parvo vaccination is a particularly effective vaccination, which does mean that it generally lasts a pup for a lifetime. So the Australian Veterinary Association dog vaccine guidelines from 2015, which are currently still in use and up to date, say that most pups are immune for a lifetime from puppy vaccinations. In Western Australia here, and I'm pretty sure I speak for most Australian states, I don't know about other people in other countries, so you'll have to check your local guidelines. But here, parvo is really the only dangerous endemic disease for dogs in Australia. There are occasional outbreaks of distemper still, particularly in greyhounds in New South Wales for some reason. So distemper is largely, has died out, but it hasn't completely, and that's why when we do a blood test to check to see if our puppy is immune after its puppy vaccinations, we check for parvo and distemper. So Vet Path Laboratories here in Perth is probably an Australian-wide leader in getting a really good quality blood test, which would cost you no more than $100. And then you'll get a bit of paper back saying this puppy's immune to parvo and distemper and doesn't need vaccinating. So I personally use a 10-week finish vaccination. So some pups that aren't weaned until 8 weeks old, I just get the owners to, quite quietly take the puppy home from the breeder and keep it at home for 2 weeks. Don't let people visit who handle other pups. When the pup's weaned at 8 weeks, it takes about 10 days for the maternal antibodies from the mother's milk to be rid from the pup system. Those maternal antibodies can stop the vaccine working fully. So what we want to do is vaccinate the pup at about 9.5 to 10 weeks onwards for the first time. Research at University of Sydney has shown that a vaccination prior to that time only lasts for about 10 days. Obviously for orphan puppies or early weaned puppies, that is a good idea to do. But for puppies that are weaned at about 8 weeks, we don't really need a 6 to 8 week vaccination. But we do have to be really careful in those 2 weeks. So, I get a lot of puppies coming here for their first vaccination at 10 weeks. There are 2 on the market, which are called 10-week finish. That's Novivac and Duramune. And then my clients generally will either at 16 or 17 weeks have a teeter test, or maybe have that blood test done while the animal's under anaesthetic, having spay or castration surgery, or they might come in at their 15-month checkup, which is when most vaccination reminders are sent out. And I have done hundreds and hundreds of 15-month dog checkups where I've just taken a blood sample and done a teeter test for parvo and distemper instead of vaccinating. And I can name on one hand the puppies that weren't covered. So the majority of 15-month checkups, the dog's still immune, as the AVA guidelines said they would be from their puppy vaccinations, provided you have done the puppy vaccinations appropriately. So I'm very, very careful to make sure that the pup has been weaned at least 2 weeks before I vaccinate them. That's really important for the vaccine to last for a long time. And the pup must be in good health. Yeah, so kennel cough, according to the AVA guidelines, is an optional vaccination. It doesn't work particularly well. Kennel cough isn't a particularly nasty disease in most cases. If kennel cough is contracted by the pup, yes, they might cough for a few days. On my website, I've got an article called Natural Kennel Cough Treatments. So, a lot of my clients just don't do kennel cough vaccination. The dog may not get kennel cough. We manage fine if they do, and then they end up with a really long and strong immunity, having got kennel cough, just a little bit like chicken pox in kids. If you do need a kennel cough vaccine for dog training or boarding or eventing, then the oral kennel cough vaccination, which is called BronchiShield, is by far the most effective, and the manufacturers told me they based it on homeopathic principles, because I have found that using homeopathic kennel cough no-sode for years is amazingly effective. It actually works much better than the needle one. So not only the needle vaccines contain aluminium and mercury and formaldehyde, they are nasty chemicals that aren't good for pups, and in fact we don't need any of those. We don't even need trace amounts for our health. There's an intranasal kennel cough vaccine that's not as quite as safe or effective as the oral one, and the needle one I really wouldn't opt for. So that's if you do need to do the kennel cough vax. And then we can opt to do a teeter test every 3 years. So at 4 years of age and 7 years of age, a lot of my clients like to do that just to make sure. So I've been using this protocol now for nearly 25 years. So I've seen dogs go right through the whole lifetime, staying immune from their 10-week puppy vaccination, which is what the manufacturer said, and the AVA guidelines, which is based on a lot of good research.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for that with all three of my dogs. They were teeter tested after, you know, from 16-week vaccination thereafter. And even Chica, you know, being at 13 years of age, was still within the required immunity level, and she had not been vaccinated since 16 weeks.
And I'd also just like to mention that if you're in a country where there's rabies, you know, that's different. You have to follow rabies protocol. And there's some areas even of Australia that have leptospirosis, and there's other, you know, diseases. So I haven't included those. I am in Perth in Western Australia. We're very lucky with our climate. You know, we don't have a lot of diseases others have. So, okay, so things to do. So wait until your pup's well settled in your home before you change the diet, or before you change anything really, you know, so maybe just keep the bedding that it had is really helpful. Keep things really quiet, because if we start giving food to an upset animal, we can actually create allergy and we can create leaky bowel disease, because the effect of adrenaline on the body is to cut the blood flow to the gut, you know, so it's really important that we don't upset the pup in those first 2 weeks. I do standard intestinal worming, you know, so I use all the normal suspects, Dontal, Papentil, whatever's around for you, you know, for a normal wormer. They're not particularly harmful. You get the occasional animal that's allergic to it, but I have actually tried with a breeder to use the herbal worming products for a mother and her puppies. And because the immune system is depressed so much in that time, we found that the herbal ones didn't really work fully. You know, so I actually do use the standard intestinal worming. So I make sure they're done twice a month apart. That normally makes sure all the baby worms are done and dusted, and maybe every 3 to 4 months during the first year of age, particularly to get the roundworms. After about a year of age, generally we only get tapeworms. In Perth, again, we're really lucky. We don't have hydatids. We don't have, or very rarely have, hookworm and whipworm. So, you know, I'm just speaking on behalf of what we have here. So a lot of my clients don't even worm their adult dogs unless they get worms. If they do get worms as an adult, they're going to be just the normal Diploidium dog and cat flea tapeworm, which is not a hydatid and it's not really, you know, dangerous. So then we worm twice a month apart, go back to doing nothing. But you do need to check out what's happening in your local area, particularly if you're in a hydatid area. So flea and tick prevention, again, I would not normally routinely use that on a new puppy. You know, some of these chemicals are really quite toxic. Some are less toxic than others. I don't really want to name lots of names, but some of the more tried and tested ones that have been on the market for a long time that are just for fleas and not for lots of other parasites. So if you only have fleas, that's all you want to treat for. Don't do more chemicals than you need. And also there are a lot of natural flea controls now. So particularly in America, they found a lot of the toxic reactions and also resistances to these chemical flea and tick products are becoming a big problem. And the herbal vets there have really had good success with herbal protocol. Sometimes you need to individualise it. There's an article on my website called Natural Flea Control for Dogs and Cats. So that gives the basics. Or just use the least toxic products for 2 months in a row. That spans the flea life cycle, which is just over a month. Go back to doing nothing. And if you do keep using these products month after month, year after year, you can get resistance build up when then the things don't work for you. You know, so it does make sense to not be using them continually unless you absolutely need to. So heartworm prevention, you do need to look at your area. Again, I mean, we're fairly lucky in Perth. We're not tropical, and heartworm likes tropical areas. So heartworms died out largely in Perth, although it still is around. I generally suggest that if people live in a heartworm area, so near the Canning Vale boarding area where there's lots of dogs and also mosquitoes from the Canning River, you know, the Herdsman Lake, wherever there's a lake and lots of population of dogs and mozzies all together permanently, that's where you're going to get heartworm perpetuating. So you may need to use one of these monthly heartworm preventions. You can look at the product details and the lifestyle of the heartworm, and you may find that some of these products are fine to give only once every 2 months, sometimes once every 3 months, because it actually takes about 5 months for the heartworm larvae to become an adult in the heart. So there's about 4 or 5 months where the larvae will just circulate in the dog's bloodstream, and they're very, it's very easy to give one of these products and the larvae are just killed in the bloodstream. You know, it's ideal to do that, obviously, before the larvae become an adult in the heart, which takes about 5 months. So often you can just knock off the larvae if you give a pill every 3 months or so, and that's much less drug than doing it every month. Obviously, it's heap better than the daily one, which is hardly ever used now. You can actually also blood test your pup every 2 years, because it takes about 3 years for heartworm to really set in and be dangerous. So that is an accepted method to not use any product and to just blood test every 2 years. You may like to include one of those blood tests as a teeter test to check for parvo distemper as well while you're at it. Okay, so feeding real food. Where's the evidence? So many vets say, here's the evidence. So we do know locally that guide dogs in Queensland, which is quite a big organisation, actually decided to take all of their guide dogs off dried food diet and put them onto a balanced natural diet. They used the Leading Raw brand, and they found that the dogs had 60% reduction in health problems and vet visits, including vet expenses, which is pretty impressive. The most important research at the moment is at the University of Helsinki in Finland. So Anna Haag-Borgman has actually been carrying out research now for many years on 6,000 dogs. And it's very, very detailed, very high quality research. And overall, they found that the dogs, they were divided into 3 categories. So they were divided into dogs fed a balanced raw diet, that another third of the dogs were given a balanced home cooked diet, and the other third were given only a processed food diet. And very, very significantly, the raw fed balanced diet dogs had a much lower chance of getting a lot of different diseases and also behaviour problems even. The cooked diet dogs had a few more problems than the raw fed dogs, but the cooked diet dogs had much fewer problems than the processed fed dogs. So it's very conclusive research. She's looked at a lot of different areas. I mean, she does a talk every 2 years. She speaks at the Raw Feeding Vets conference, and she presents in English. So a lot of her research is in Finnish, because that's where she lives, but she's increasingly releasing it in English, and she does present at conferences in English, and you can go on the website, you know, which has got an English version, and that's excellent, amazing research. She's looked at so many different areas now. Connor Brady actually showed that domestic dogs in Australia actually happily returned to wild diets when they went wild, and now they're actually a big problem. I mean, farmers actually having to shoot these rewilded dogs because they're a problem for their farm and their stock. So, I mean, in a way, it's not a very nice example, but it does tell you that domestic dogs can actually just go wild and eat a wild diet, you know, which is what we call a crossover trial in science. And of course, we also know that cats, in fact, are a problem on the periphery of suburban areas, in that they do live quite happily on wildlife, unfortunately for the wildlife, you know, but again, it does show that, you know, a lot of cats are capable of living on a wild diet quite happily. There is, what I base my natural diets on the USA National Research Council Nutrition Guidelines for Dogs and Cats. So this website here, you can actually download one for dogs and another one for cats. It's free. They're about 20 pages long, and they're just a really easy layperson's guide to what a diet needs to include and why. And yeah, that's just a really good resource. They also provide a really big, thick textbook, which costs nearly $200, which food nerds like me have. So we can get, we are very evidence-based in formulating our natural diets, is basically what I'm saying. You can also do it a bit yourself. So if you go on, for example, myfoodrecord.com or Balance It as well, the website's just called balanceit.com. You can actually plug in the foods that you want to feed your dog, and it'll spit out how much of it to feed. The Balance It, you have to actually use their product. It's a powdered product that you mix in with the food. So that's an easy way just to do your own, but you don't need to, because there are other ways you can get those. So I'll go into it later. So just a bit more research. This one came out recently. They found that pups that were born to raw fed mothers had a low rate of atopic dermatitis in the first 3 years of life. That was just released this year in May. And that's because raw food, and particularly raw meat, has bacteria in it. And good bacteria are good because we need to have our microflora to keep us healthy. So not all bacteria are bad. Looks like bacteria are probably more good than bad by the looks of this research. So that's really interesting. It's another one. So some vets say keep the dog on dried food until it's grown, but that actually isn't evidence-based. It's evidence-based that it's better to have animals on a low carbohydrate diet, which is basically the difference between the balanced raw fed or homemade diet and particularly a processed dried food diet, which is 25% more carbohydrate than the balanced natural diet. So they found that joint-prone breeds of dog at 2 years of age actually had a higher incidence of hip dysplasia if they were on the processed food compared to if they were on a raw food diet. So we do know that raw food diets for any breed, but particularly the large, quickly growing breeds, which can have lots of joint problems, are better off on a balanced natural diet. You must include enough bone, enough calcium, of course, that's really important. But given that the diet is balanced, then it's much better for the dog than particularly processed dried food diet. So why don't we just slap all these pups onto a raw food diet the day they arrive? Well, for starters, we suggested we need to get the pup to settle so we don't cause food imbalances and intolerances. Also, if we look at what happens in the wild, the mother dog actually goes out and finds the food, she chews it up, and she'll either spit a bit out in front of the pups that's pre-warmed and chewed and has a bit of amylase mixed up in it, or they actually do swallow the food and it's partly digested in the stomach, and then they vomit it up for the pups. So, really, I guess that's nature telling us that we probably shouldn't, give them all completely raw straight away. And we certainly do find that there are some breeds, particularly the retrievers and Labradors, I find, particularly the retrievers, they can have dodgy guts. It's just their tendency. So you do need to be a little bit careful that you don't create problems by going too raw too quickly. Also, it can, if the pups arrive and they've been on particularly a processed dried kibbled food when they arrive, the dried kibbled food does actually run the gut to alkaline. So it runs it about up to pH 3 sometimes. So if you then gave a pup a lump of meat, really dogs should have a pH in their stomach of about pH 1 to 2, preferably nearer to 1, and they need that to digest raw meat and particularly raw bone. Now I find it takes dogs sometimes up to about 2 or 3 weeks for their pH to adjust to sort of learn how to digest raw. So it's important to spend about a 3-week changeover period at least for that reason, if nothing else. There are bacteria on meat, and bacteria can be handled by pups normally if they're given a transition time. Again, going back to the mother dog vomiting, etc., and the pH changing. So the pH 1 really acidic stomach contents of a normal dog basically kills nasty bacteria, so it'll kill salmonella. The meat that you buy in the supermarket, particularly poultry, can harbour salmonella. So if you buy a lump of chicken breast from a supermarket, 80% of it's going to have salmonella in it. always has done, always will. So it's no big surprise that raw meat contains bacteria. And unfortunately, there's a lot of press at the moment, and even a lot of vets have been told that, you know, raw meat's bad because it contains bacteria. Well, as we've already just seen, bacteria on raw meat can be beneficial because it can make pups, not get atopic dermatitis because it can give them a better immune system if their mother ate raw meat. So we do have advantages mainly of meat containing bacteria, but of course, the most important thing to remember is that humans don't have an acidic stomach, and humans can get affected by salmonella. So they found that by far the most problems caused by feeding dogs raw food is really to the owners. So the owners can get contamination if they, for example, chop up their, the raw poultry for their dog, and then use the same chopping board for their own meat or their own salad, particularly. So you just have to be really careful the way you prepare poultry. That's the main reason why there are problems. In fact, there have only been about 6 cases documented of dogs actually getting salmonella from eating a raw food diet. And those dogs would have had suppressed immunity or been just given it too quickly or at the wrong time of their life. There's been many, many recalls of processed kibble dry dog food because of salmonella. So there have been way more cases of salmonella in dogs caused by processed dried food than it has been from raw meat. So here we go. So here's a balanced raw diet for a 15 kilos worth of pup. Nutritionists just use 15 kilos of dog per day as their standard. So, divided in by a third for the daily portion if you've got a 5 kilo pup, for example. So raw bone. I'll go into bone a little bit more later, but so I often use free-range raw chicken wings as a bone that equates normally to most prey that dogs, would be intended to eat. We've got some raw meat. We've got some offal. So this is just really emulating the prey that a dog is intended to eat. So if we think that most breeds of dog would eat a rabbit, they'd eat a duck, they might hunt down a wallaby, they might catch birds. They probably wouldn't kill a cow. So, so we want to try and just keep to prey-sized appropriate animals. Also, unfortunately, a lot of agricultural chemicals turn out in animals such as beef and to a certain extent caged chicken. So we just need to keep that in mind as well. So we're very lucky to have meats like roux, which are basically wild caught and low in contaminant chemical. Free range chicken obviously is heaps better than caged. I'll just avoid caged for all sorts of reasons, of course. Goat is a good one too, because it's reasonably wild caught and free range. Turkey are reasonably free range. It depends on if they are and if they're mainly grain fed or not. So grain fed for these animals can rapidly increase the agricultural chemicals which aren't good for your animal to eat. So we've got good old offal. I know some people don't like handling these things. Lamb heart is reasonably clean. It's nice and chewy. It's not sloppy. It's easy to buy in your supermarket. There's some really good green tripe products that are freeze dried, so they don't stink like the fresh green tripe. Tripe is nature's digestive enzyme basically because it's hard to get pancreas. That would have been the digestive enzyme in a natural diet, so tripe takes that place. It's all sorts of other offal. Liver's an important one because it supplies zinc, manganese, vitamin A and D and some fatty acid. So liver is a little bit like the vitamin pill of a natural diet. Obviously, this diet is compiled with the NRC USA guidelines and it's completely balanced, assuming these foods contain the nutrients that an average portion would contain. That's going to vary a little bit, of course. We can only go so far with being accurate. So this is a complete and balanced raw food diet here. So blended fresh green leaves is basically the gut contents of a rabbit or the prey the dog would normally eat. So dogs would eat vegetable matter that is rotten and either from a rabbit gut contents, which is well chewed and fermented and warmed up. They would eat berries off the bush. There's good evidence that wild dogs, such as wolves and foxes, pick berries off bushes. They eat dropped fruit and berries on the jungle floor, which are semi-decayed, and they eat herbivorous dung from the jungle floor. So there are ways that vegetation is almost pre-digested, if you like, for dogs. They're not super good at eating a crisp, fresh carrot. You can give them carrots to chew on for fun and to clean their teeth, but often, you know, you'll find, like Billy Connolly's jokes, you'll find little bits of carrot coming out in the poos, which tells you that they're not getting a lot of nutrition from it. So some veggies are better cooked. So carrot, pumpkin, broccoli, cauliflower are better cooked, and otherwise blended fresh green leaves, banana, mango, berries, pumpkin seeds, don't chuck them out, put them in your dog's smoothie, cucumber, spinach, coriander, parsley, chia seed. So fibre is really important. It's the food for good bacteria in the gut. So it's what we call prebiotic fibre. So that's chia seed, flaxseed, pumpkin seed are all excellent. Watermelon seed is excellent. Whole citrus, even including the pip, is fine. So you can, you know, cut a lemon or an orange in half, chuck it in. Absolutely brilliant food. Citrus peel is a major Chinese herb, actually. It's great stuff. So, and we'd have to do fatty acids. So that's one of the things people will often miss out. They'll forget about the sardines or the fish oil. Fish oil capsules have had a bit of a bad rap recently because they can go rancid easily. So you have to be careful with the brand and the length of time. You're better off getting a big bottle of Melrose fish oil, you know, from your health food shop. Just keep it in the fridge after you've opened it. Or just good old sardines or mackerel or pilchard, either fresh or canned, are excellent source of fatty acid. So bones, obviously we can cause problems feeding bones, so we need to be really, really careful about what we're doing. This is a silly picture that my husband made because my daughter left her template from the dentist at home. With bones, we again go back to them being prey appropriate. You know, so just have a think about a Labrador coming from Labrador, you know, on the east coast of North America, what they eat, etc., etc. You know, Lagottos, what they eat. You know, so we need to just look back and see what they're designed to eat. Some short-nosed breeds, such as French bulldogs and pugs and Pekingese, actually can't always chew bones. Unfortunately, they've been bred to the shape nowadays that, you know, it wouldn't be naturally how they'd be. You know, so we do need to be careful of those short-nosed breeds not choking on particularly chicken necks. I must admit, I'm not a big fan of raw chicken neck feeding. Because if it's a caged chicken, it's been sitting next to the thyroid and chemicals accumulate in the thyroid gland. You know, so I really don't recommend caged chicken necks. Free-range chicken necks are fine for dogs that they suit. So you stand there and watch them, you know, because a chicken neck can be swallowed and it can be a choking hazard. You can often reach your fingers in and pull it out. It's better not to have to do that. Raw chicken wings, free range, are probably my favourite bone because they're nice and soft. They're prey appropriate for just about every breed. They're irregular, and so they force the dog to chew. So if the dog chews about half a dozen times before it swallows it, teeth are going to be clean. So it's nature's toothbrush. So dogs that have a raw chicken wing a day usually just don't need dental work at the vet. Simple as that. If they do, it's because of their jaw shape. Another possibility is that they're very confident chewers and they actually need a bigger bone, and they might just go one chomp swallow, you know, for the chicken wing, in which case you provide a bigger bone. So you might do, you know, a turkey wing or a lamb neck, etc., etc. So we need to, we just talked about prey appropriate bones. Pugs don't kill cows. Feed bones that can't be gulped. Short-nosed breeds, and the non-weight bearing bones, that's the fourth point down here, are necks, wings, backs, tails. So none of those parts of the body bear a lot of weight in the original animal they came from. So they're much safer because they're less dense and they're more even. And yeah, they're just a safer chew. So necks, wings, backs, tails are good things to use. So kangaroo tails, chicken backs, chicken wings, turkey necks, possibly chicken necks if the animal's fine with them. So what we don't want to do are the weight-bearing bones, which are like the big marrow bone or the lamb shank or the drumstick of the turkey or the chicken, because they're very dense, and they can splinter if the animal isn't good enough at digesting. So just be a bit careful with doing those weight-bearing bones, and of course never feed cooked bone because it's set and polymerized and it can splinter. And when vets say to you, I'm fed up of taking bones out of dogs, don't feed bones, it's because people have fed cooked bones primarily, or they fed those wretched big beef marrow bones, which the supermarket sells because it doesn't know what else to do with them, but really there aren't many dogs that they're suitable for, so just be aware of that one.
So Claire, with bones, one of the questions that I get asked all the time by my guys is when they feed a raw bone of some description and their puppy or their dog will take it out the back, they'll chew on it for a while, and then they might leave it for a day or two. Should we be worried about it being left out, exposed in the sun, doing a bit of that cooking process? Should we be actually taking the bone away from the puppy or the dog once it's had that initial chomp?
Basically, dogs do that because the bone's too big for them.
Yeah.
Hard. So you find if you give your pup, say, a kangaroo tail bone, and it takes them out the bag, that, like, I'm translating for you from dog language to human dog language, saying that bone's too big for me. So what you do is give them a small tail tip of the roux, rather than the big segment, or you just do a half a raw chicken wing instead of a whole chicken wing. So if you give them the right size bone, they'll just hoe into it straight away,
as opposed to burying it, to finish consuming later on, or to just go off in the backyard.
Exactly. So I just wouldn't, if they carry it out the back, you just think, oh, I've fed the bone too big for it, I have to feed it a small bone, or I'll cut it in bits or whatever. Yeah. And there's nothing like just standing there and watching them chew. Like, you have to do that the first 3 times at least. You give your pup a bone, stand there, watch it, and then straight away you'll know what size is the correct bone for your dog.
Right.
Yes. So either they just look at you like you're mad and walk away, or they'll pick the bone up, take it outside, bury it. So that just means I can't handle that bone, it's too big for me. And you'll often find that dogs with inflammatory bowel disease who just, they just aren't competent at digesting raw stuff, particularly bone. They just think, oh, I can't do it. So then you just have to go easier or softer or smaller or whatever, to suit them.
Right.
So this is my dog. She's a working Labrador, and that's her food. So she doesn't have all raw. So what we need to do with pups is not give them all raw straight away, as for reasons that we've discussed. So she will get a bit of a soft stool every now and then, and so I just do cooked veggies. So they're lightly steamed. There's a bit of quinoa through them as well, and we've got a green supplement and fish oil or fish. We've got some roux meat. We've got some lamb heart. I think there's a bit of whatever was happening at the time. So a bit of leftover porridge. So that's semi-cooked. So other semi-cooked foods would be the Prime 100 roll, or another good quality roll. So that's actually quite a good thing to start a pup on, because we know it's reasonably complete and balanced. The Prime 100 roll. I'd try and use something like a meat and pumpkin one rather than a meat and tapioca, just to keep the carbs down. And or just cooked. So we can do everything cooked just with a bit of raw bone, and you might find that's easier than to digest than everything raw to start off with. So you just start off cooking the veg, then you might put on a bit of green leaf smoothie, which is what I do with my dog. If I give her too much, it just comes out as diarrhea. But if I put a little bit in there, she's fine. So when we first get our pup and it comes on it probably comes with a packet of dried food, then obviously continue with that for a week or so until it's completely settled. Then you try one thing at a time. It's really important to introduce one new food at a time, and then you know what they like, what suits them, what's going to give them the runs, etc., etc. So I would just try cooking some veg, you know, make it nice and mashed if you want, stick it down there, see what they do with it. You can cook up some meat. So remember, you don't want to cook fatty meat, because cooked fat can cause pancreatitis and dietary upset a lot more in dogs than it can in people. So nice lean meat. You can cook roux, except it stinks. I normally suggest feeding free-range chicken. I know some animals can be allergic to chicken, but most aren't. And if you start with just a nice free-range, you know, chicken breast or chicken thigh with the fat cut off, and you just poach it lightly, you know, throw some veggies in later when you know it's all right with the meat. Just add on one new thing at a time. You can get some Prime 100 roll. You can even get some good canned food like Nature's Bushes and all that, you know. So you can try your canned sardines in spring water. You might then think, okay, let's try some raw. So you might get a bit of lamb heart, chop it up. That's nice and chewy. Bit of raw diced kangaroo meat or mince. So again, just one thing at a time. Try and keep the chemicals low. Try and keep the fat low to start off with as well. You know, we do need a bit of fat because it's good for us, but not to start off with, you know, until the body's used to digesting it. So if you want to do completely cooked, the only problem with that is obviously we don't want to feed cooked bone. And it's absolutely vital for puppies to have enough calcium. In fact, the main difference between a completely balanced adult dog raw diet and completely balanced pup diet is that the pup diet contains 15% bone, and the adult diet contains 10% bone. So we really need to keep the calcium up there in a natural diet for dogs, which means either you basically, because a chicken wing or a chicken neck or a roux tail, etc., is probably very approximately about half bone. In fact, it's probably a bit less than half of it is bone. So because you want to feed 15% of the diet bone, you're going to be feeding about 25 to 30% of the diet raw meaty bones. So that's a lot of chewing on bone. Or you just go to the pet shop and buy a bath. You know, so the BARF, biologically appropriate raw food, bath products, you know, like the Leading Raw we spoke about before, the guide dogs in Queensland. You just go to your pet shop, go to the freezer, and it will have Dr. B's bath or Big Dog bath or the Leading Raw bath. You know, there's a few new brands coming out now, which is great. There are also a lot of really good small businesses like, you know, Pet Chef and Pet Fresh and others in Perth that actually do cook up or just do a completely raw diet or whatever you want, in fact, for your pup. So if you're busy working, you can just say to them, can I pick this up once a week, or they'll deliver it, even depending on the business. So that can work really well for you too. But if we're going to do a cooked meat and veg and maybe canned fish or fish oil diet, instead of feeding bone to start off with, you know, if the pup, as we were just talking about, just looks at the bone and thinks, what on earth is this? Then you can start by doing raw minced bone. So just get your butcher or your deli person to put about 15% bone in with some minced meat. You might just hand over some chicken wings. So you might say, do a third chicken wing, 2/3 just plain meat, and say, can you mince this up, please? You know, because the butcher's got some really great meat and bone mincers there, and it's easy for them to do it. And then you feed that. So then you know that you're very, you know, you're happy that you're feeding enough calcium in bone, in the raw minced bone to your pup. And that's a really good way to start feeding raw bone, because it's easier to digest minced bone than whole bone. You can actually use cooked eggshell powder. So I've got my organic free-range chooks here. So I actually make up eggshell powder, both for the chooks to give them calcium and also just for clients to put in their completely cooked recipes. So you save your eggshells in the fridge in a container for up to a week, and they'll go off after that. But you turn the oven on to 180 degrees. You put the eggshells broken side up on a dry tray. No, don't put oil on it. You stick it in the oven for 15 minutes. Then you take it out, you leave them to cool down, you put them in your NutriBullet, and you go buzz, and then they end up as a powder. So that eggshell powder you can keep in the fridge or the freezer. It freezes really well for a long time. And that is just such a great bone substitute for pups that are too digestive incompetent to have any raw bone, and for adult dogs as well with inflammatory bowel disease for that matter too, who just can't handle raw bone. So you'd be giving here 2/3 of a teaspoon for 250 grams of meat. So that would be for 15 kilo pup per day. So that matches in with that recipe I gave you. You can also get coral calcium powder or seaweed calcium powder. Most of the time, they're environmentally sound, so the coral is above ground and it's already dried up and all that sort of thing. So you can just buy that product, and that's pretty close in its mineral composition to bone, as is eggshell powder. So one of the main things people do wrong with a homemade diet is not have calcium in it. They'll think, oh, I forgot to keep on with the bone, but I'm doing everything else. And it's like, no, you can't. We don't want to go back to days where puppies get rickets, because they're calcium deficient. So it's so important to remember the calcium. So you can use, right down at the bottom here, there's the Balance It website, and they give you a powder that you mix up with the meat and veg and whatever else you're feeding. Or there's a really good supplement called the Wellbeing Supplement now, which is available in Australia, and you just mix that up with the meat. Or there's a new one called Besties as well, which is really good. That lady's put a lot of effort into it. So those supplements contain calcium. They also contain the equivalent of, sometimes even the offal and the green stuff and the fatty acids and everything. So you can actually just bung those into some meat and mix it up, and that's a good place to start, because it's all complete and balanced. The calcium's in there, and they're just honing in on a bit of raw meat. They're getting used to raw stuff, so that really, they're not bad options at all. And of course, the Prime 100 rolls and the other roll foods do have calcium added as well, so that just makes life easy while you're transferring over from what the pup came with, which is normally dried food. Then you just go one ingredient at a time, and you use cooked. And then we're just adding on raw bits, and then we're going to try a bit of raw bone. So about a 3-week period, we're just switching over. So if the pup does get a bowel upset, which can happen, you just go to the health food shop or the chemist and you get some slippery elm bark powder. Absolutely wonderful stuff. In fact, if you just buy some anyway and mix it up with the food, then you can preempt diarrhea and prevent you getting to have to clean up your carpet or whatever. There's also a probiotic called Saccharomyces boulardii, and that's amazing stuff. I just use that instead of the flagyl that the vets use, for diarrhea in dogs and cats. And you can go to a chemist and ask for a probiotic that has Saccharomyces in it. It's not going to do any harm, and it just keeps the bowel bugs balanced. So Saccharomyces actually just eats up the bad bowel bugs that cause diarrhea. And slippery elm bark powder just works physically. It just makes nice slippery gooey stuff to line the gut, just like the gut has anyway. So that they're really great things to have around for a new pup, just in case, or to preempt. Obviously, cooked food's easy to digest. So if you've got a pup that tends to diarrhea, beige, boring, bland food is the best for them. And vets intuitively have worked out the Chinese food therapy chicken and rice. The beige, boring, bland food is ideal for animals with gut upset. And also bone broth. Not that bone broth has a lot of calcium in it, but it's got very, very easily absorbable nutrients, and it doesn't over stress the gut. It's just easy on the gut. And you may know about the GAPS diet. It's a book written by a doctor. And with humans with inflammatory bowel disease, you can just fix them giving them bone broth, as you can cats and dogs as well. So bone broth is just really, really kind and soothing to the gut. It's great food. So free-range chicken, turkey, white fish, just pale, bland stuff. Pumpkin sweet potato, cook up nicely. Mushroom, zucchini, they're all good they're all good foods for diarrhea. I'd avoid the grains unless we need them and they suit the animal. And then once they have settled back to normal, try and introduce some prebiotic fibre, because that again gives food to the good bowel bugs. and the dog then is basically probiotic in itself in the long run. So flaxseed meal, chia seeds, pumpkin seed meal. Oat bran is a good one. Oat bran actually cooks up all stodgy like porridge, but it's much lower in carbohydrate. And these herbs as well. So ginger is just a classic herb for the gut, just brilliant. Cardamom is good for particularly the stomach being upset, etc., etc. So they can all really help. So now we're going to get on a little bit more to what Colleen deals with, behaviour issues. So if we want to have an easy to train, happy pup, then we do need to reduce chemicals. So this is all really bad news on this slide, but it's just to make you realise that, like, honestly, 1 in 70 children now in the Western world have some degree of autism spectrum disorder, which is really quite scary. And we think a lot of it is due to they have particularly high brain aluminium levels, so that can be aluminium, particularly in vaccination, in some water, mercury in fillings, even lead. Unfortunately, there's quite a bit around. It's in some tap fittings. So, there's a bit of stress around around at the moment. So we just need to realise that and do things about it. So remember also that pets are right close to the ground, and if you spray glyphosate on the weeds, etc., then they are a little bit more prone to being in contact with it. So talked about that before. So reasons why you don't want to feed processed dried food, particularly because it's made under intense pressure and temperature. There's a process called the Maillard reaction, and it means that when you have protein and starch cooked and pressurized together, it can cause acrylamide compounds, age compounds, which actually are inflammatory and carcinogenic. So basically all processed dry kibbled food is inflammatory and carcinogenic, even if they start off using organic food. Why you'd want to turn organic fresh food into a processed grain food, I don't know. And even the grain-free still has carbohydrate. So like grain-free really doesn't mean a lot. I mean, it might mean that you don't have so much chemical on it if it comes from America particularly. And remember that, if a dried food contains 25-30% carbohydrate, that's going to end up being sugar in the bloodstream and then sugar in the brain, because that's what happens when it's absorbed. So, and these are brain excitators, so they can lead to attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, overreactivity, anxiety, not a good ability to train. When you've got an excited or fearful or anxious animal, you just can't train it. The brain isn't in a situation where you can train the pup. So you have to get these guys to settle down, before your training's even going to start working. And again,
the quality of the learning is much poorer.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and it's just, it takes more time and effort, and it was Hill Science Diet actually did some research, and they found that if you just put extra omega-3 fatty acids in the form of fish oil into a puppy's food, they're more trainable. So it's particularly the DHA of the fatty acid. So in fish oil, there's EPA and DHA. The EPA is the fatty acid good for skin, and the DHA is the fatty acid good for brain. And with processed dried food, as soon as you open the packet, the fatty acids start degrading. That's in the NRC guideline book. It's a fact. And that's probably why the Hill Science Diet fed pups improved with their training ability when they gave them fish oil. So that was good research that they did. But yeah, so I won't carry on about that. And the processed pet foods that are for anxiety and etc., behavioural problems, these are the things they've added into the dried food. So tryptophan, which we can get in egg whites, sesame seeds, spinach, spirulina. Tyrosine are in nuts and seeds. So nuts that are safe for dogs are walnuts and almonds. Don't give dogs or puppies macadamias or cashews just because there's the inside of the hull is slow to mature, and the inside of the hull of some of these nuts are poisons to put, to stop birds pinching them before they're ready to grow into a new tree from nature's point of view. So, so almonds and walnuts are the best nuts to feed. Seeds, so chia seed, flaxseed, pumpkin seed, watermelon seed, etc. Eggs, spinach, there's tyrosine, vitamin B6. All these things are in natural diet. Vitamin B12. Sardines have heaps of nutrient. They're such a good food. Zinc, liver seeds, meat, omega-3 fatty acids that we're just talking about. So phytoplankton is a really interesting new food. It's actually vegetarian, so it's just like the vegetable plankton in seawater, and it's a fatty acid supplement, and it's also, basically a green supplement. So if you can get a phytoplankton product, there's one called Ocean Alive, I think, and anyway, they're sort of like, it's up and coming, and it's also, if you don't want to feed fish because of mercury or for environmental reasons, then the phytoplankton's a good way to go. But I have to admit, I do like the small oily fish. They're just like a lot of nutrition in them and a lot of fatty acid. It's always better to feed a food rather than a supplement. So I prefer to feed, even if it's canned sardines or canned mackerel. And of course, there's hemp seed oil, which doesn't have quite enough omega-3 fatty acid, because dogs aren't so good at converting omega-6s to 3s. But hemp oil and olive oil are good additional oils once you're already feeding a bit of fish oil or phytoplankton, omega-3. So getting back to actual real food and herbs, we can do a lot for healing and calming. Limiting carb, as we just talked about, so reducing the excitation of the brain with the sugars that come from the processing of the carb. So in a physiology veterinary textbook, it actually says, don't feed dogs and cats more than 5% carbohydrate. Otherwise, it will inhibit liver gluconeogenesis, which is a process whereby the liver gets rid of nasty chemical from the body and does a lot of other good things for the body, such as make protein for muscles and make the immune system stronger. So, and like processed dried food, like rolled cannon's 30% carbohydrate. So it's like a little bit of a no-brainer, pardon the pun, that we really don't want to be feeding these high carb foods to animals, particularly if they're overexcited or anxious, or if you just want them to be healthy. So greens, green leaf smoothie, blueberries, turmeric, is such a great herb for the brain and the liver, and it's anti-cancer. Amazing stuff, really researched, probably the most researched herb. If you want to read what different foods and herbs do, go to a website called greenmedinfo.com. That's greenmedinfo.com. He's just done such a great job to compile all the research into food and herbs, and what they're good for, and what the research says. So again, seeds and nuts, almonds, walnut. Brazil nut is a good nut if you don't give it too much. It's got selenium in it, so not many things contain selenium. Most in chronic infection and most cancer patients are selenium deficient. So Brazil nuts, great way to give us back selenium. So I just give about 1 or 2 Brazil nuts a week. You don't want to overdo selenium. And walnut and almond are really safe to give. Lots of pumpkin seed, again, chia seed, flax seed, all that we've been talking about, but not macadamias, not cashews. Beans, we can go a bit vegetarian. I mean, in my natural prescription diet book, I have actually got a vegan recipe and an ovo-lacto-vegetarian recipe and a pescatarian, which is fish diet recipe. Doesn't suit all dogs. Dogs aren't really meant to be vegetarian. In some cases, actually does benefit them, particularly if they're meat allergic, etc. But so I won't go there now. But it's just to say that some dogs can eat legumes, chickpeas, etc. But they must be soaked for many hours, even overnight, to drain off the lectins. Because what a pea or a bean wants is to land on the ground in some animal dung that's just eaten it and grow into a new plant. So these peas and beans have actually got lectins and other compounds on them to stop them being digested, and that can upset the digestion of the dog. So you need to drain them all off, put new water in, and then cook them. So they're an option. Some dogs don't suit them. Chamomile's actually been researched in both dogs and humans to be more effective than pharmaceuticals for chronic anxiety disorder. Mm-hmm. Just good old chamomile tea, strong chamomile tea actually. So golden seals are just like an antibiotic and a settling the gut down herb. It's brilliant. Lemon balm I just use heaps. I actually grow that in the garden, and lavender's a great herb. The flower of my liquid herb tinctures that I've got in my clinic, the passion flower tincture is the one I use the most of, because it's such a great calming herb. And again, you can just grow it and make it yourself. So, and all these things are so researched, people just don't realise. And then back to bone broth again. So the Raw Essentials website's got a really great discussion on bone broth for animals. Green stuff, it just makes you feel better, doesn't it, looking at it? That was my veggie garden a couple of years ago. So I think we're nearing an hour now.
Yep.
Not too long. So this is really just a slide to show that if we get into Chinese food therapy, we can actually get a little bit more clever as well with food and herbs. So those, the Chinese medicine people would call those hyperactive breeds, like the Kelpies and the Border Collies and the Healers, yin deficient. So we tend to feed cooling foods. They can even go a bit more vegetarian, etc. The chi deficient are worried and stressed and overthinking and over-worrying retrievers who worry about their owner and want to do the right thing. And it can actually affect their digestion. So they're the ones that tend to need a bit more cooked food. And the ADDH autistic phobic ones can be the most affected by bad chemicals. And then we've got the pups with a heart condition, or their runts, they're small for their age, liver shunts, what we call blood deficient. So again, we can alter their diet. So that's probably enough, I think. I've just got a bit. So that's my husband, who's not yin deficient. He's focused taking a photo. I'm sorry.
And of course, all these diets that Claire has just spoken about are all in a book. So Claire has written some books on feeding raw and natural for cats and dogs. And they are available, and I'm sure we'll both have the links through our various platforms to be able to give you guys, but they are an absolute wealth of knowledge. And for me, when I first bought one of Claire's books, in fact it was The Natural Diets for Cats and Dogs, I think I first bought the little one, the red one, and I got that when Chica was 2 years old, and it was really interesting how that book continued to guide me right up until Chica was 13 years of age. So, a great investment to get a hold of both of Claire's books if you get the chance.
So they're on my website, and you can buy ebooks of them, which don't cost very much if you want ebooks.
Right.
I get the hard copies, so they're very easy to order from my website. And also on my website, there's a heading called A Natural Diet for Dogs and Cats, and that's free. And very soon I'm going to upload information on a puppy diet as well. So it has a balanced natural dog diet, a cat diet, and a puppy diet there. That's all free on my website.
Right.
Okay, so I think that's enough info for now.
Excellent. Okay, and I've got one question for you, Claire. When you were talking about the various oils and herbs that you can add in, sorry, I'll rephrase that, the various herbs, and there are a number of essential oil products that are therapeutic grade, so can be ingested by people. And I get asked all the time, is it okay to be using those types of things with our animals?
Yes, so with knowledge and with care, and diluted is the issue. Well, there must be about between 1% and 3% diluted in a carrier oil.
Yep.
It's the undiluted oils that of course poisonings.
Yeah.
So this website is oilyvet.com.
Oilyvet.com. He's got some great resources. Yeah.
That's Melissa Sheldon. So she's a vet in America who is very knowledgeable. She's written a big, thick textbook on using essential oils for animals, all species of animals. She's brilliant. So there's a lot of misinformation online, unfortunately, on other websites about essential animals. So yeah, oilyvet.com is the place to go to.
Yeah, yeah. And sorry, did you say that was Melissa? Did you say Melissa Shelton?
That's right. Yeah, she's a vet.
She wrote the ADR reference book. Yeah.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, she's, in fact, she's written 2 books. But I mean, I do use essential oils. I've got a lotion that's my go-to for skin problems, and I also use it as an ear drop.
Yeah.
So I use essential oils a lot, but just, like with care and diluted. And it's really important to use a good quality one because it's the contaminant chemicals, particularly that can cause a lot of the problems.
Yeah, beautiful. And with something else that you said that was really interesting about the chemicals that we use within our homes, and because our dogs are just by default, because of their size, lower to the ground than what we are, and that they can absorb those chemicals, I suppose, to a much greater degree than we can. So probably switching to some of those maybe more essential oil, but appropriate for our animals and things like that. Would you consider that would be more beneficial for our dogs?
Oh, it's like there's so many toxic cleaning chemicals around.
Yeah.
And there are so many really natural, safe ones that work just as well, if not better. There's no need to use horrible chemicals like the quaternary ammonium ones, and there's just so many bad ones. But so the natural essential oil-based ones, but read the label, because there's lots of words that you can't pronounce, then you don't want to use them.
Fantastic. Okay, that sounds great. All right, I will finish our recording there. Go into the Q&A portion. So Claire, can you see in your chat, can you see the questions that everybody's beginning to post? I'll just unmute. I'll unmute everybody as long as there's not too much noise in the background. Okay, there we go. All right, Claire, you're unmuted now. Can you see everybody's questions there?
There's a question that pops up every now and then. There's none there.
That's okay. All right, I've got them here then. So I will, sorry guys, some of your IDs are a bit different to, I know who's on there. I've got a question. Who's titled Greg Stewart? Wave your hand at me. Oh, there we go. Okay, right. Excellent. That's Natalie. So Claire, Natalie has asked, are rib bones suitable when feeding raw?
Rib bones? They can be, yep. Depends on the dog. It isn't my first choice, because some dogs could gulp them down whole, and cause a problem. But I know a lot of dogs who eat ribs sensibly. There's a product called Pet Snacks, and they're actually dried ribs, and they're very popular and actually clean the teeth really well. And when I first saw them, I thought, oh gosh, they're not going to get stuck in the dog's gullet. But they did, yeah. So, most dogs do chew bone sensibly. It's just sometimes they don't. That's all. So I guess I just err on being super safe. But if your dog eats rib bones well, then fine, they're good for your dog. Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Natalie? Yep. Cool. Okay. All right. And Claire, this evening we've got Joe who's joining us from Karratha. And Joe is curious about heartworm risks in Karratha. Is a 2-year testing sufficient?
If you live in Karratha, or if you live anywhere, up north where it's basically tropical, then you have to be very, very aware of heartworm. So for a start, that dogs have to be on heartworm prevention. You can still be, if you're good at remembering, you can give, and I know I shouldn't use brand names, but, there's quite a lot of products such as HeartGuard Plus and New Heart and Value Heart that are pretty well just ivermectin. And it says on the packet, give 1 pill every month. You can actually just give 1 pill every 3 months, and it's 100% effective, because you're killing all the larvae before they've got a chance, before they've got 5 months to grow into an adult in the heart. So if I lived in Karratha, I would give my dog 1 Value Heart once every 3 months instead of every month, just because I don't like giving extra chemical. But you have to be good at remembering. So you can either put a reminder on your computer or however you do it. But yeah, you must, in Karratha, you have to do heartworm prevention, or the dog's going to get it.
Sorry, Claire, what was that Value Heart, did you say?
There's Value Heart, which is VALUHEART,
Yeah.
There's Nuheart, which is Nuheart. And so all of those are just ivermectin.
Yeah.
There's HeartGuard Plus, which is ivermectin plus roundwormer, which you don't necessarily need for an adult dog, but for a puppy, if you're just going to give heartworm, that you can do it for the 18 months that the 6 tablets last for, if you're giving it every 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a bad choice, because you probably still do want to roundworm the dog in the first year, every 3 months. And every 3 months is much more appropriate for the intestinal worm part of it anyway. That doesn't need to be given every month.
Yeah.
So it's off-label, as they call it, like I'm telling you something different than the manufacturer's told you. But I mean, it's when, if you look at the life cycle and you look at the product, you can tell straight away. Even at the launch, they gave us a free dinner back in the 1980s when they first launched it. And at our table, we put our hands up and said, but you only need to give it every 3 months, not every month. And they're like, shh, don't tell anyone. So as long as you know what you're doing and you're responsible for it, that's fine.
And that covers, what about other worms? Should I be, is pumpkin seeds sort of blended up a few days a month enough for that? Or should I be adding something else in?
Well, I mean, as I said, I actually use some quite good herbal anti-wormers. They have walnut hull and clove and wormwood and a few different things in, and they didn't work. We gave them to mothers and puppies.
Right. Okay.
And they didn't work. They were about 70% effective. So I simply wouldn't rely on herbal wormers. I mean, I think most puppies are fine just being given a wormer twice a month apart, and that's all they need. They may not need any other worming the rest of their life.
Yeah.
But roundworm can be nasty. I have actually had a couple of clients whose dogs got nasty round worming when, they were owned by someone else and looked after.
Yeah.
But it can be really nasty. The larvae can wander around.
Okay.
So I just think it's worth worming them properly.
Yeah. Okay. That's
But you don't have to keep on doing it the whole life. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Simone, you've got a question. Would you like to take yourself off mute and ask your question to Claire?
Yep. Which question was that one?
First one, Neospora.
Neospora, yeah. So I was wondering about with the raw feeding, with the diet, with the Neospora, Toxoplasma and sort of other protozoa, what the risk is. Is it something that we need to worry about? And if it is something to worry about, is there anything we can do to reduce the risk of the dogs contracting them?
Yeah, so freezing should. I mean, I think you need to freeze them for 2 weeks, not just a couple of days that kill some other parasites. So to my knowledge, freezing for 2 weeks gets rid of them.
So ideally if I bought, say, because I buy like the human grade raw meat, that sort of thing, ideally I'd freeze them for 2 weeks.
Yep. Mm.
And then batch. Well, actually, I'll probably batch everything all up and then freeze, not feed for 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So freezing is the way to go. Yeah.
Is it actually a big risk if you're using human grade meats?
I haven't come across many cases, to be honest. I think I've had about one client with a problem. So I actually don't know how widespread it is, but I just haven't come across it much.
That's right.
Yeah, I will
Thank you.
actually look it up and find out. Yeah.
Cool. Now, Tracy, you had basically the same question. Did that answer your question for you? Yeah. Okay, hang on. You're on mute. Let me just unmute you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Hi. Sometimes you can get information overload. So I know that I had read somewhere that maybe the meat needed to be frozen first. I just couldn't remember, to be honest. And we literally just got our pup yesterday. So he's come from a breeder where he's had a partial raw diet and biscuit. And I'd like to continue, but sort of wean him off the biscuits over time. But it's knowing how to start off on the right foot, I suppose. And I did print out the guide for feeding a puppy, but it was obviously based on a heavier weight pup. So I was just trying to work out, is there a percentage that you go by to, yeah.
Or yeah, so I think Claire, you were talking at the beginning that the diet that you had on the slide was for a 15-kilo puppy. So if Tracy's puppy is only say
450,
yeah,
You just have to work it out proportionally, except that it's normally more, a little bit more proportionally the smaller the pup. So it's around about 3 to 5% of their body weight.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
with a smaller dog, it's going to be nearer 5%, and with a large dog, it's going to be nearer 3% of their body weight.
Yeah.
But really, the only answer is, like, if they're getting thin, you feed them more, and if they're fat, you feed them less, because we're not all the same. But that's just a rough guide to start off with.
Okay, great, thank you.
Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. So with that pup that's on dried and raw already, I would just just buy a bath if you want to, and use that as a raw bit, and then just over the 3-week period feed less dried and more bath. And then start introducing little bones, so like a chicken wing tip to start off with, for example, and get them chewing, and those chicken wingettes that they're selling are quite neat, so they're like the next joint up of a chicken wing. So they're like less than half a chicken wing.
Yep.
Stand there and watch them chew it. And then after 3 weeks, you won't be feeding any dried food, you'll just be feeding bath and bone. Yeah, and then once you've got them on bath and bone, then you can, if you want to compile your own diet, you can then find out what they like. So if they like your creamy smoothie, they can have some of that. If they like a particular meat or offal. Yeah, so do just one at a time. Just do it slowly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, mate. When Claire, when people are feeding a raw or a cooked diet, but that isn't available for whatever reason, like they're traveling or the product is just not available. The question has been asked if things like Ziwi Peak and Providor are suitable substitutes.
Yeah, the Ziwi Peak air dried is great. And also those freeze dried products, so the Canine Natural.
Canine Natural, yep.
And there's Frontier Pets, which is very posh, so that's a freeze dried, and all the meats are all organic and they're all ethically raised animals. Yeah. So that's, it's lovely. It's a bit expensive, but it's lovely.
Yep.
So it's in a packet, and it's light, so you add water to it, so it's really easy to transport around. Yeah.
The Ziwi Peak is my saviour. I get home or I've forgotten to take something out of the freezer. It's like Ziwi Peak. So I've always got some, Joe, at home ready to go. Just in case.
With my dog, she just gets an egg. I just squash an egg in my hand to break the shell, and then a bit of coconut yogurt and whatever else happens to be. Yeah, so that's her dinner that night.
Eggs are great. Claire, we got time for just maybe one more question? Okay. Now, somebody was asking about feeding mince. Is there a certain fat percentage that we should be aiming for?
Well, no, because if you're feeding raw fat, basically it's safe, but you just have to get your dog used to digesting it. So if you've got an adult dog that's been fed lumps of raw meat and bone for years, it can handle really quite high raw fat. It's cooked fat that causes pancreatitis. But if the dog hasn't got the enzymes built up to digest a lot of raw fat suddenly, then can get quite unwell, get vomiting and diarrhea. So you just build up the fat quantity. And fat is a really good way to put weight on skinny dogs. So if you've got a really, really skinny Kelpie, and you're shoveling food into it, it's not putting weight on, you can use fatty meat. So you might use really, like really fatty beef mince if you can handle beef. Yeah. And that's a great way to put weight on them. And that's ketogenic, so you should be using a more of a ketogenic approach to put weight on them rather than start giving them carbohydrate. I mean, you can give them up to about 10% carbohydrate if they're super busy and working and they're really burning up the calories. But most dogs, I wouldn't give more than 5% carbohydrate. So raw fat is a good way to put weight on. Or you can give them a slurp of olive oil, a bit of coconut oil. Yep. That's how you do ketogenic diets with dogs with cancer. You just add more fat.
Yep. Great. All right. I think, is that everybody's questions? If I haven't asked a question, give me a quick wave.
Colleen, sorry, can I just, I know I spoke to you about this morning, but just in regards to Roo, Claire, I took my puppy for his 16-week vaccination yesterday, and they said he was a little bit underweight, and so I got some advice about feeding him, and it was probably quite horrible advice actually. She said basically just to put an unlimited amount of food in his bowl and let him eat until he can't eat anymore, basically until he's sick, I guess. And obviously just being aware of bloat and everything, I just I guess wanted some better advice on how I could get weight on him. You know, should I he's fed 3 times a day at the moment, and should I be feeding him more often, you know, smaller meals? I'm just obviously not comfortable with feeding him till he's sick. I don't think.
So what are you actually feeding him at the moment?
So he is on Black Hawk puppy food. That's what he was on when I got him, but he's also, I'm transitioning him over to raw. So I would probably say maybe 25% to 30% is raw at the moment, and also kind of a bit of a cooked diet, because I've got a bit of a mixture. One of my dogs can't tolerate raw, so she gets cooked, so then I might add a bit of that onto his plate as well.
So what breed is he?
A Siberian Husky.
And he's got good bowel motions, like he doesn't tend to get diarrhea?
No, I mean he has a little bit in the past if I've introduced something new, but nothing. Actually, in saying that, sometimes he might have a little bit of mucus in his bowels, but that's just happened a few times. Maybe when introducing something new.
So that's not why he's losing weight. I mean, I'd just feed him more. So because at that age they're growing so quickly, they really, you do have to shovel food into them. So I just feed him 10% more than what he's feeding at the moment. See how he is in a week. Maybe add on another 10% more to see how he is.
And just adding that onto his 3 meals, not feeding more often as well.
No, at that age I wouldn't feed any more than 3 meals a day. In fact, he's just on the verge, or soon, of only needing 2 meals a day. But just add 10% onto the total amount. So if you're converting from dried to raw, just feed 10 the extra 10% of the total diet in raw food, not the dried food, because that will help transition anyway.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Great. All right, guys. Claire, thank you so much. Fantastic information, certainly, as always. As somebody who is a raw feeding advocate, a teeter tester, and likes to reduce chemicals as much as possible, I use so much of Claire's advice. So I'm a big advocate. So thank you so much, Claire, for your time and your knowledge.
Well, thank you for your original idea. It's a very good one. Yeah, thanks.
Great. And guys, I will email the link out to you so that you'll be able to go back and have a listen, because I know, as we already did this recording this morning, and I picked up things again listening to Claire say it all again this afternoon. So you'll have it available, and that recording will be there for you for the next 12 months to access. So just check your inboxes shortly for that. Okay, beautiful. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.